We'll chat. There's things to say.
Yes, we'll chat.
Yes. So it is Kari, like Ferrari, Wahlgren. It's a Swedish name, because my parents are big Swedes. And I grew up in a really tiny town in the middle of Kansas. So when people say, can you become a voice actor, or do you have to live in, a big city and stuff like that? I like to say I grew up in a town with one stoplight, literally one. And when they added a second stoplight, everyone got so outraged that they took it out. Yeah. Thank you for this. So, but I was always obsessed with cartoons and graphic novels and things like that. They had this, at our local library, they had a compilation of Wonder Woman comic books. And I checked it out so many times from the library, the book fell apart. And so they pulled it off the shelves, and I kind of died inside. And then years and years later, this thing called eBay popped up, and I found it, because it went out of print, and I found it, and it was the first thing I ever purchased off eBay, was this book of Wonder Woman comics. So apparently when I was 5 years old, I told my parents, one day I'm going to be the voice of a Disney princess. And they said, I don't know that that's a job, Kari. And I was like, but there's someone doing the voices in these cartoons. And one day I shall do that. So early on, I don't know why, but it was on my radar that someone was doing these voices. And so I would run around and I'd act them out in my house. And I got really into theater. I got really into singing as I was growing up. And for anybody that says, like, how do you get into voice acting? What do you recommend? Theater, singing, performing, any of that. It's great. And so I did a lot of plays, sang a lot. I was a child ventriloquist for many, many years. Oh, yeah.
Do you still have the dummy?
I'm not kidding.
Do you still have...
Now did that shit.
Do you still have the dummy?
Sorry, that was not safe for work. I apologize.
Do you still have the dummy?
I still have, yes. His name is Danny, and he's in a suitcase in my closet. And if you ever want to freak out your friends, you say, yes, I have a puppet in a suitcase in my closet. You'll be surprised at how quickly your friends get really freaked out. You're welcome. So as I got older, I started, watching cartoons, and I was very heavily influenced by Batman the Animated Series. So I loved that show so much. Like, I would run home from school, I would watch it and everything, and I would watch the credits, and it would say, voice direction by Andrea Romano. So I went to the local bookstore, and I looked up the Warner Brothers address in a book, and I wrote her a fan letter when I was like 13. And
Aww.
I think your voice direction and casting on this show is incredible. And one day, my dream is to move to LA and to do voices, and I hope I get to meet you one day. Fast forward, years later, this story always makes me emotional. Ben 10, I got cast as Charmcaster. In my first session, I went in, and she was the director.
Ooh.
So I was trying very hard not to cry, and I got to work with her. So that's, sometimes it works in life, and you have full circle moments. So when I was in college, Dragon Ball Z, I got really hooked on that Kool-Aid. And they were very smart because they would air marathons. And I sat down and I thought, well, I'm just going to watch until the end of this fight. And so 10 hours later, I'm like, what is happening? I don't think they're going to finish this fight. So I had like a little Dragon Ball Z pillow in my dorm room. I was big into Eon Flux, which wasn't like this big one, but like that was so trippy. And if you're very tired and sleep deprived and watching that late at night, it'll do some things for you. So, I did professional theater after I got out of college, and then I moved to, and I started doing radio commercials and things like that. I moved to LA, and within the first year and a half of being in LA, we had actor trade papers. So if there were auditions for things, there were papers, and they would give audition notices. And they said, we're auditioning for this new cartoon, come and audition for us. So I went and auditioned, And I said, we really like you, we want you to come in again, and we're gonna send you home with a VHS tape. Because I'm 100 years old, and we have these things called VHS tapes. They said, you're not gonna understand what it is because it's in Japanese, but we just wanna see if you can capture the tone of the character. So I took this VHS tape home, and there was this girl, and she was riding in on a Vespa, and she's like, Mom's Dad, it's a boy, and she's hitting this kid with a guitar, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
Fully Kari.
What provide this, and I got the role of Haruko in FLCL. And that was my very first anime ever. And so I showed up, and we started recording that. And the cool thing about that show is that I didn't realize it at the time, but they took a lot of time with it. Because it was only 6 episodes. And a lot of times with anime, you're working really fast. Like they don't have the budget for a lot of time, so you just have to get it done quickly. And with that one, they took months to get it really right. And they had the original team from Japan come over. So here I am sitting there, and I would say a line, and you'd see this whole team of Japanese clients with the English clients on the other side of the glass going. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting fired. And then they're like, no, they're just ordering lunch. True story. But yeah, so they really wanted to make sure that it translated and that it was really authentic from the Japanese to the English version. And so any of the really obscure references, the English team really wanted to make sure that they were obscure English references that kept with the vibe of the original Japanese. Another quick little story about that is that in one of Haruko's big monologues, and she's like, Rage Against the Machine, blah, 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 Richard Cheese! I now know Richard Cheese. Like the guy, it turns out that he's a friend of one of my friends, and we met and chit-chatted and stuff, and he emailed me, and he's like, you heard of this thing called FLCM? Somebody told me that my name's in it. I was like, dude, you have no idea. Anyway, so that's just one of those great small world story things. So that was my introduction to anime, and then I started booking more and more anime and more video game roles, and then kind of another cool story is my first Disney series. When we get over to talking about original animation or US animation, my first series was Super Robot Monkey Team Hypercorsia.
Oh, I remember that one.
Anyway, and the fantastic thing about that was it was heavily influenced by anime. So when I got that role and I showed up for the first recording session, one of the guys there was wearing an FLCL t-shirt, and he had no idea.
Was it,
so it was another one of those moments.
Was it Greg, Kevin, Clancy, Tom,
Full circle,
Mark? Who was it?
And this is back where, anime was such a niche thing. I mean, you can buy anime stuff now at Target, okay? So we are living in a golden area where this really has gone much more mainstream. And back in that day, it was not like this at all. So it's been incredible that, FLCL was, 23 years ago now?
24.
And they haven't kicked me out of town yet. Woo! So to see just this evolution and where anime has gone, and to get to work on all these titles and different things that I was such a fan of when I was a kid has been a real dream come true. So I'll stop there and just kind of check in and see if you guys want to start asking questions. I'm seeing questions, yay! Okay, gentlemen.
Right here.
Get this thing to work.
Okay, Kari, I kind of asked this to Keith at his table, but why is it that for people like him, yourself, Stephanie Shea, Danielle Judovitz, Steve Bloom, Fred Tassiker, and so forth, audio drama work that you guys have done constantly gets swept under the rug? Case in point, all the names I mentioned, including yourself, you've worked on, I believe, something called Adventures in Odyssey in the past.
I have. Yeah.
What was that like being alongside some of the most legendary voice actors of all time? People like Hal Smith, Walker Edmondson, Janet Waldo, Alan Young, Jess Harnell, Will Ryan, Katie Lee, and so forth.
Well, gosh, I would start by saying, I don't know if a lot of those first folks that you mentioned, if the work is getting swept under the rug. I think, I mean, obviously some of those people that you mentioned are very legendary. I take it as a huge compliment when people come up to my table and they say, oh my God, I didn't know you worked on this and this and this and this. I mean, we can only pick a certain number of things to advertise when we go to a convention. So it is never, I always take it as a compliment if people say, I did not recognize your voice in this. That means I did my job well. You know what I mean? And, you know, definitely some of the, I hate to use the word old guard, but, you know, some of those legendary folks, I looked up to some of those people very much myself. I mean, Frank Welker, the first episode that I ever did of Scooby-Doo, and he starts doing Scooby in Fred's voice, I almost wept like a baby, you know? And it was so amazing, like with that one, I got to say the infamous, and I would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for the kids, and I was like, take me now, take me now. You know, so yeah, I mean, I don't know if some of those people get swept under the rug as much as they're so prolific and they do so much work that a lot of times people just don't realize how much they've done.
Trust me, I had to look in the wiki until I didn't find out you were in it until when I looked in the wiki recently.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you found that credit. That makes me very happy. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have other questions?
When you did Shoegaze and Grudge, that was a 3-episode anime versus the traditional 6-episode anime with the other coolies. How was that different to still tell a story in essentially half the time to tell that story?
That's a great question. Oh man, I can tell you guys a story about grunge, but I would prefer not to have it videotaped if you guys are if you're okay with that. It's not like it's